Hi again, everyone. It's 5 o'clock in the East. Tragically, it is becoming a more common and terrifying phenomenon. People turning to violence in furtherance of their extreme political beliefs. In recent years, the number of violent threats against politicians and government officials has ticked up. And in some instances, as you saw there, those threats have materialized into actual attacks, or at least attempted ones. The specter of political violence is not new. But what is relatively new is the public permission structure around it. For the past several years, the leader of the Republican Party, the Republican frontrunner, who also happens to be an ex-president, has signaled in both implicit and explicit ways that his perceived enemies should be punished, held to account through aggressive or violent means. He has riled up his base with incendiary rhetoric and images. And as we've witnessed, those messages can be interpreted by individuals in ways that can result in disastrous consequences. All of this top of mind as the indictment issued Monday night out of Fulton County, Georgia for Donald Trump includes a list of names of the 23 grand jurors who eventually returned a 41-count indictment against the ex-president and 18 co-defendants. Their names are on the indictment due to Georgia state law, but now NBC News is reporting that their purported names and addresses have been posted on a fringe website that often features violent rhetoric. Washington Post is reporting on this and says that a post on a pro-Trump extremist forum said, quote, "It is time we do the doxing," invoking a practice that typically refers to exposing someone to harassment by publishing their personal information online. Another agreed, writing this, quote, "People need to be outside these people's houses." And it is not just the jurors on the receiving end of these intimidation tactics. The now 4 times indicted ex-president has been using his social media platform to spew ugly criticisms and attacks against prosecutors and judges overseeing his criminal cases. Last week, Judge Tanya Chutkan, the judge overseeing Jack Smith's election subversion case, warned Trump against making inflammatory statements. It is a warning he did not heed. He's also viciously attacked Special Counsel Jack Smith, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, and Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. The New York Times reports that, quote, "Some lawyers have said that if Trump were an ordinary citizen issuing these attacks, he would be in jail by now." Trump's potentially dangerous rhetoric and the threat of political violence in America is where we begin this hour with some of our favorite experts and friends. Former Assistant Director for Counterintelligence at the FBI, Frank Figliuzzi, is back with us. Also joining us, former Department of Homeland Security Chief of Staff, author of the book Blowback, A Warning to Save Democracy from the Next Trump, and the host of the Whistleblowers podcast, Miles Taylor, is here, and Democratic strategist and director of the public policy program at Hunter College, Basil Smikle, is here. Miles, you have so much going on, but I know you are animated and motivated by this desire to warn of the natural endgame for Trump and his supporters, and that has been something you've been warning about the loudest, maybe the longest, you and Frank Figliuzzi. Talk about what you see in this moment.
Well, this book, Blowback, Nicole, I didn't want to write it because, as I've said to you many times, I don't want to be talking about politics anymore, but we're stuck in this environment where political violence is one of the biggest threats to our country. And the reason I talk extensively about it is because we now have a political party that is mainstreaming that violence as an acceptable tactic. And the studies show that the GOP base is embracing it. But one of the worries is that this was foreseeable. It was very foreseeable. In fact, there's someone I want to quote. Go back to 2016, one of Donald Trump's Republican opponents for the GOP nomination very prophetically spelled this out. He warned that Trump had a history of inciting violence, that his henchmen did, that if he took the White House, he would be like Michael Corleone from The Godfather, and that this would be a very dangerous environment because he would run that administration like a mafia and he would act like a mobster. That person who made that warning was Ted Cruz, the same U.S. senator who this week defended Donald Trump against the charges in Georgia. So that just goes to show you how powerful this radicalization has been, that the same people who were warning that this guy would incite mass violence have now been brainwashed to go out there and defend him for some of those past acts that led to violence. I think it's a big worry. Donald Trump continues to blow that dog whistle. He did it to me when I came out against him. And it's why, Nicole, many times I've joined your show from different places. One of the apartments I used to join your show, we had to leave that apartment because of the menacing packages and messages that were arriving there with regularity. We did not feel like it was safe to stay there anymore. And I don't need people's sympathy, but it's just one example of many, many examples of this happening around the country. And unfortunately, now we are seeing that with the jurors in this case, which is wrong. And law enforcement should pay close attention to whether there's further violations of the law because of that intimidation.
You know, Frank, we have a lot of conversations about the sort of structural inadequacy available to law enforcement of staying left of boom of domestic terrorism. And I wonder if you think we're reaching a tipping point where a policy conversation can ensue, or is it too much on one side for that to happen?
Boy, I'm way beyond hoping and wishing that we're going to get to policy or even legislation here. Still don't have a domestic terrorism law, as you know, and more importantly, the tools in the toolkit, I think, are still not there for law enforcement. So when I look across the extremist sites just today, before coming on the show, I see, as you said, vile racist attacks on Fani Willis and others. I see people adopting the use of Donald Trump's now word. This is a new thing. He's using a word that rhymes with the N-word, and now it's been adopted by these extremists to refer to black people. So, you know, that's coming soon to a theater near you. That's horrible. But someone's going to get hurt. They're going to get hurt, and I can predict that, not because I'm clairvoyant, but because it's already happened. People have been killed because of the ideology and rhetoric and inciting of Donald Trump. Most recently, Craig Robertson in Provo, Utah, but the police officers, the Capitol Hill police officers and Metro PD police officers on January 6 who had heart attacks and or strokes and or died by suicide. The people in the Walmart in El Paso, Texas, who were killed by a young man who adapted the rhetoric, the brown invader language of Donald Trump. The people in the Tops supermarket in Buffalo, because the shooter there adopted the white replacement theory of the far right. So it's getting uglier. And yes, there's a gap in what law enforcement can do about it. They've got to balance civil liberties and free speech with getting ahead of the crime before it occurs. It's an incredibly challenging threat environment.
Frank, is it right that mob trials are the closest parallel that we have in terms of looking at how Trump is acting as he gets indicted 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and looking at how his side is treating the jurors in those cases?
Yeah, I've seen between Italian organized crime and drug cartel trials, I've seen analogous behavior and threats, but certainly not at a national level. So if you have a drug cartel case in Miami, yeah, you better hunker down to secure the courthouse, the jury, the prosecutor, and the judge, of course. But you're not doing, it's not a national threat. It's a threat from the cartel against witnesses and jurors. And that gets done, and that's over, essentially. And yeah, even, by the way, I've seen juries get completely tampered with, and even family members blowing up of witnesses and jurors paid off. Seen all of it in the drug world. If you go to Italy and look at their battle against the mafia there, you see judges and prosecutors, one after another, getting assassinated by the mob. So sadly, we'd have to look to that for analogous behavior as well. In the FBI Academy courtyard, there's a bust of Judge Falcone, the Italian judge who brought the fight against the mafia and successfully, but died in that fight. That's what we're talking about here.